Good evening, everyone. Today we are here again. We'll try and learn English and we'll try to cover another very important aspect of it. One great man, I'm not able to recall the name, came up with or crafted one sentence with a set of words, something that is really magical, something that will give you an infinite insight into as to why learning a foreign language is important. When you cannot communicate in a foreign language or when you don't know a foreign language, you don't know anything of your own either. When you learn one language, it opens the doors for you. When you learn two languages, it opens all the doors for you. Therefore, today we are here with an idea to understand as to how we can craft an atmosphere that will facilitate the learning of English. And not just the learning of it, the seamless learning of English. One thing that I've always been a proponent of is English or any other language for that matter is not a formulaic subject, a subject that demands a certain pattern, a certain format. When we are trying to study a language, I believe one won't be thoroughly wrong to decide to treat it as if it's an art and not a language. The way we treat an art, in the manner that we treat the art, is excruciatingly different from the manner we treat something that requires technical expertise or that requires one to undergo a course into understanding the technical expertise of a particular subject. For example, if you're studying science, you're required to go through the rigorous process of educating yourself or going through the role of conventional education, and then you equip yourself with knowledge of it, knowledge which is obviously never ending, but then you graduate and you postgraduate, and there is a certain format and parameters which are set and you need to follow them. But I firmly believe with a language, perhaps that is not the case. Any language cannot be formulaic because it is spoken and written. We're not solving a sum here, or we're not devising a theory. It is just a language which will facilitate you to convey your feelings, emotions, sometimes pleasant, unpleasant, sometimes orally, sometimes via written mediums. Now, considering that it is less of a subject and more of an art, and we completely eradicate any degree of formulaic uh, mechanism to it, and if we treat it or gaze at it from the prism of art, a lot of things will change. Our entire outlook will diametrically change. That means just the way we learn how to sing, just the way we learn how to dance. Now, not taking away the technicalities involved in singing and dancing, but still, it is something that you have to have a natural feel for. You have to be a natural dancer and you have to imbibe it naturally. By the same token, we're not trying to undermine the technical aspects of the English language, because over the course of thousands of years, there have been authors who have come and who have extrapolated English and any other language from the realms of techniques, format, a certain officious manner. So we definitely cannot discount upon its, what you will say, formal structure, and we can only discount upon it on our own peril. Yet, it could be, if at all, one tries to imbibe it via natural means or naturally, without getting into its grammar. What I'm trying to say, to simplify it in one sentence, let's try and learn it without delving too deep into its grammatical realms. Because and most of the people that I've known are of the belief that when we become too fussy about grammar and its rules, at the back of our mind, it always runs amok. There's a certain filter, and we're always scared whether or not the sentence that we are making is right. Now, that happens because we have developed a phobia with grammar. Now, let's try and understand, or let us try and find out if at all a foreign language could be learned without getting too deep into its grammar. Let's see what happens. The role of the atmosphere. The atmosphere plays a pivotal role in conditioning a man's communication prowess. Now, this does not come off as a surprise. I'm sure it is no revelation of sorts. We know that atmosphere is incredibly important. For example, whatever language that you have mastered or you have attained some degree of command over, try to think about it. How did you learn that language? When you were a toddler or a small child, how did you first learn to craft a sentence which is grammatically correct? Did you, at that tender age, attain a grammar school? Or did somebody at the age of 2, 3, when a child starts to speak in English or any other language for that matter? I'm sure parents don't hire you a tutor to teach you how to use or how to employ Hindi language simultaneously taking care of its grammar. Does it work like that? I'm sure it doesn't. And if you did not undergo long stretches of grammar learning in Hindi and you're still fluently communicating in Hindi, and if you have attained a strong command over it, how did you do it? The language that is predominantly employed in the vicinity of a child in his primary years will become his mother tongue, as his system will imbibe it naturally and will allow for fluent and coherent articulation of the language without understanding the building blocks of the language, in other words, grammar. Now, how come a child develops this efficacy to fluently craft sentences in Hindi? We'll take Hindi into account because, of course, in India it's our almost the mother tongue, almost the most prominent language in India. How did you do that? Without grammar. The simple answer, almost protruding, is everybody around you spoke in Hindi. Your mother, your father, and if you have had the privilege of living with your grandparents, then so did they. And if you have had a bigger privilege of living with your uncles or whosoever, then hundreds of people around you communicated in that language. And because round the clock that language ran amok around you, like athletes running around or in a relay race, it started getting rubbed onto you. And you imbibed it without a grammar temper. At that tender age, you did not have a critical temper. You are not able to assess whether or not your sentence is correct from its grammar point of view, but you were able to craft sentences. And that happened because everybody around you spoke in that language. Language is a part of culture around you. It has very little to do with its grammar. Or I would say the role or its affiliations with grammar are almost negligible, especially when it comes to the communication module. So if I tell you, or if I pose this question at you, that you learned Hindi without grammar, then how come in this world you decide to learn English with grammar? Isn't that interesting? If you look at these two prepositions, it's like you've learned one sport without getting into an academy. And for another sport, you need an academy which is categorically training for that particular sport. Why would you do that? If you are able to craft sentences in Hindi without grammatical errors, then how come you won't be able to craft sentences in English without grammatical errors? Let's find out how can we create an environment wherein a foreign language could be fostered and it could thrive and run amok around us like athletes run in a relay race. Find out. The deciphering of the language and its employment without any inhibition irrespective of grammar can only be possible when the above factors are well at play, barring a few avoidable exceptions. Now, here comes the rabbit hole. And here we confront the obstacle. If the sole available way to learn a language naturally is an atmosphere that has at its heart that language, if that's the only way, that you need people around you communicating in that particular language, only then you'll be able to employ that language efficaciously without making errors. If that is the only way, then we are in a bit of a disarray here. Because now we simply don't know where to go. Because the society that we live in, the atmosphere or the vicinity that surrounds us, does not predominantly promote English. Then how do you do that? How do you go against the grain and craft an environment on your own? Because now this is a serious problem. As I've myself stated, that there's one way, only one way to attain that natural command over a foreign language, and that is to have an environment around us which has English at its heart, which is oozing with English, in other words. How do you do that? Let's try and find out. If the atmosphere is of utmost importance to imbibe the language naturally, then the only available resort is to replicate via artificial. Had we been discussing this 15 years ago, had this discussion taken place 15 years ago, I would have said it is nearly impossible to learn a language without environment. That means we can impeach the idea and just go back to our own safe harbors and live our whole life with this disappointment, unsurpassable dismay that we'll never ever be able to master the language that we are so in love with and that we find so enchanting or so glamorous or something that is imperative in today's world. But why do I today green light it that perhaps cultivating an environment like that is possible. Why do I say that today? What has changed in the course of last 15 years which propels me to attain a stance which is outrageously different to the one that I would have had it been 15 years ago? One change that has come by is technology. Have you ever thought about it? All of us today have a supercomputer right down our pockets. Just on a hand's distance. All the knowledge of the world is down there in that diminutive device. Just one click, and you are exposed to the greatest speaker in the world. You can hear the Hitchens speak. You can hear somebody talking about Shakespeare. You can hear somebody talking about Thomas Hardy with the level of oracy that is absolutely unsurpassable. Now, how does that help you? Technology has seen a paradigm shift that enables us to access everything. That is, the medium of the language could be altered, and the entire consumption of information. This is where the battle is won. I'll repeat the line. If the medium of the language could be altered and the entire consumption of information solely takes place in English, it will create a slow burn effect which will gradually trigger our subconscious brain to rewire and switch its thinking language to English. As I've said in the beginning of this lecture, one language opens the corridors for you. And when you learn two languages, it opens all the doors for you. As I was just talking about this particular discussion taking place 15 years ago, I would have had a very different opinion about this. My stance would have been extremely pessimistic. But today, 15 years down the line, we have a luxury that our predecessors were bereft of. And that is the mobile phones, my friends. All of us have that in our pockets. A supercomputer, I would say. Today, when we talk about environment, your environment is not in the outside world. The environment of a person ranging from the age of 13, 14 till about 60, 70, whatever, is the mobile phone. Because I'm not saying it's a wonderful thing, but it is the truth. And let us face the truth. Let us take the bull by its horns and accept that this is an epoch. It's a beginning of something very different and something that is going to grow at a rapid pace in the coming years. All of us are engrossed more in our mobile phones than we are with the physical world that surrounds us. What if whatever you do on your mobile phone could be done in a language that is not Hindi? And what if it could be done in English? Just think about it. When you're reading something on Google and you read that only in English, when you watch a video on YouTube, you watch that only in English. It doesn't have to be uh, the best orator in the world. It could be anything. It could be a car race, for God's sake, a UFC fight, a cricket match, whatever it is that you have deep interest in and you frequently watch and consume. Can't that be done in English? As I've stated, our environment and atmosphere is governed by this diminutive device called mobile phones. As this is a window at our disposal to look at the rest of the world. We no more go to our seniors and talk to them on the world affairs. We don't talk to our juniors either. And harsh truth, not even to our peers, because we have our device with us. That we may have developed a bit of a hubris out of it, but then a disadvantage is also, it could also be turned into a great advantage. Now, on this mobile phone, the video that you have been watching, I'm sorry, that you've been watching in Hindi could be watched in English. Or any text for that matter that you've been reading in Hindi could be read in English. Now, what will this do? What is this going to do? You can check your screen time. God forbid it has to be around 4 or 5 hours, if not more. For 4 or 5 hours of your walking life, you're engrossed in the cell phone, which establishes one thing, that this cell phone is governing your mental. Then who are we to say that it won't have any effect on our psychological canvas when it comes to language? And if you start hearing everything in English, watching everything in English, then it's nobody's business to tell you that it will not influence you. It is going to influence you. When you watch a YouTuber and he has an idiosyncrasy of using one word frequently, I'm doubly sure, as you are a frequent viewer of those videos, that word is going to get rubbed onto you. Because you are consuming it day in and day out. You might not start employing it right away because the process, as it's given here, is a slow burn. But in some time, maybe, perhaps in a week, perhaps in a couple of weeks, perhaps in 3 weeks, at some point in time, you will start using that word. Now, how has that happened? Because you've been constantly viewing something, and that constant watching has led to a rewiring of your mind when it comes to communication. Because, as I've said, environment plays a pivotal role. And our environment is this diminutive device called cell phone. It is governed by this. So whatever you'll see, you will imbibe it, and at some point you'll start employing it. I believe I've cleared it. That is the change, the language or this paradigm shift in technology has brought. Our predecessors, unfortunately, did not have the good fortune of having such extravagant technology at their disposal. So for them to learn a new language was doubly more difficult, and in some cases, perhaps impossible, because they simply weren't able to create that environment. We have to create that environment. And today we can, because we have the resources at our disposal which will enable us, facilitate us, abet us to have that environment right at our disposal. And we just have to use it. Because at some point, we will start using the words, the phrases, the idioms, the sentences that we are hearing in the videos. Let's go ahead. Technology is capable of this tantalizing shift because it can create a replica of the atmosphere which is predominantly English. We've just discussed this. Now, as I've already given this, I've already talked about it. Reading and watching on a phone. This is what one has to do. You can take it as gospel. It's the final, the unalterable, the incontrovertible. That the only way to become a natural, you can learn English. I'm not saying you can't learn it via the means. You can learn English. But there will always be a dash of uneasiness. You will be inhibited to some degree when you learn it via different means. Sometimes formulaic means, sometimes when the predominant attention is on the grammar. But if you want to be a natural speaker, like some people that you idealize, some people that you love listening to, you have to do this. You have to consider yourself fortunate that you have a technology at your disposal, and perhaps up until now you have not used it the right way. And once you start using it the right way, you will conjure a certain feel for the language, because everything that you're consuming on this phone is in English. Reading and watching. These are the two things that are perhaps the most, or perhaps the only modules of a communication. And when you've been reading and listening, that's exactly how a toddler learns how to speak. That's how you learned how to speak in Hindi, by the way, at first place, because you were reading in Hindi. If you were very extraordinarily young, then perhaps at least you were listening in Hindi. That made you a proficient speaker in Hindi. That instilled that natural temper inside of you, which facilitates the flow of correct grammar. And that is the defining difference why you are not able to fluently speak in English without fumbling, without creating an array of dirty, unpleasant grammatical mistakes. It sounds jarring, right? So we are here to eradicate that jarring element, and this perhaps is the only way to attain that natural flair, to attain that natural feel for the language. When a student, therefore, it will trigger a strong connection with the language, and over time can develop into a strong hold of English in the student's subconscious, will start consuming most of the information in English on their phone, as this generation is more digital than they are in the physical world, as I've already talked about it. Now it comes to watching. There's a very famous phrase: the monkey sees, the monkey does. Whatever we see around us, we have this vicarious instinct to mimic that, to imitate that. It is a human instinct and we cannot defy it. This is just a syndrome that we all are perturbed by. And there is definitely, I don't think there's a cure to it. Whatever we see, we do. Just like a toddler does. So when you're watching anything, and I've already stated that, on YouTube or any platform, even if you're watching something on Netflix, this is one critical mistake that people make. They'll watch an English movie also in Hindi. Now, the cruelty is double fold. A, when you watch the movie in Hindi, which is supposed to be consumed or watched in English, you don't really get its plot. And you will never understand the movie in its full glory, first thing. Second, it is a waste of time, because any cinematic experience is supposed to equip you with some knowledge. And if we are watching an English movie, can't it be our motive to learn a word or two, to learn a sentence or two, or to learn a gesture or two, which the characters in that cinema have employed? And as I've said, the monkey sees, the monkey does. Another critical mistake that we could be making is, even let's say somebody is fond of news channels. I think they can make that switch. Perhaps they need to. It is the need of the hour. to start consuming their news via English mediums. I mean, what harm will it do? It's a news after all, and it is the same news. Nothing will change about it. Just changing the medium won't change anything about the news, because have journalists are top tier orators. The words that they use, the sentences that they craft, their their language is just peppered with amazing elements. It's extremely eclectic, extremely fluent, extremely beguiling, bewitching. So when they speak, and if we are frequently watching them and their shows, at some, as I've said, it's a slow burn process. At some point, we will start using it, as our constant viewing of their content, I'm repeating it again, will rewire our brain. And gradually, when this consumption goes overboard, extravagant, when we are doing it round the clock, when it becomes maddening and chaotic, there are handsome chances of this foreign language also becoming one of your thinking languages. And when a language becomes your thinking language, the coordination between you speaking the words and the thoughts becomes better. For example, if your thinking language is Hindi, then the sentence will be first crafted in Hindi. And then it reaches your mind, and you will use a filter. And via the help of that filter, the sentence will then be translated in English. The process becomes threefold. But when it's your thinking language, the filter gets exed or eradicated. Now the process becomes twofold. And because it's a thinking language, the timing is immaculate. You can say as you think. And when the timing is immaculate and the coordination is perfect, what will it do? It will completely take away fumble, nervousness, anxiety, and that fear at the back of your mind whether or not your sentence is correct. Now, this, as I've suggested, watching, and if I could give a categorical example, then I would say watching news channels for no other reason but only because they possess great mastery over the language. And when you hear them speak day in and day out, their mannerisms, words, gestures, it is a complete package. Everything will come. Your hands will start moving, your timing will get better, your coordination will get better, you'll stop fumbling as well. But it's a slow process, it will take a bit of time. But once you are there, it will reach the fruition and you'll get your desired results. Now, this is another way, perhaps quite interesting. Watch and speak. Every time a candidate is cited with anything exceptional, he must make a point to voice it. For instance, the candidate must make it a point to make an oral sentence, for instance, for the above picture. Now, because you're trying to attain a certain command over the language, and it's very clear already that you are a new entrant, then at every stage of your life wherein you're confronted by a spectacle, make it a point that you'll craft a sentence on it. For example, when you move out and you've just begun your process of learning English, and you're trying to master it, be cutthroat, absolutely cutthroat. Where, let's say you moved out and it's raining outside. Make it a point to spew a set of words off your mouth which project the rainfall that's happening outside, or which, if it's raining really hard, it is raining cat and dogs. Make it a point to say that. If you're feeling uncomfortable, don't just think it in your mind. Spew the words out. Say that I'm feeling uncomfortable. Now, what that does, it's just not making a sentence, but making a sentence will lead you to make another one. Because when you say you're feeling uncomfortable or uneasy, then someone around you will ask you one more question. So you, in a way, create an opportunity for yourself to use one more sentence. You have a look at this picture. It is a lane and absolutely empty, null and void. There is not a single person, animal, anything on the street. So if you ever encounter a street like that, for that matter, wherein there is nobody and you're gutsmacked, you don't know. So make a sentence out of it. Again, I'm repeating, pull out a set of words which mirror this particular photograph. Simple. It is an empty lane. And since you have already made one sentence, let's make another one. Whenever you're struck, now what to do? And when you can't make, or you've reached a certain plateau, and that point has come wherein you are like a rabbit caught in the headlights and you don't know what to do, just give a personal opinion. Simple. There is no subject here that you can extrapolate or explore or talk about, and there is nothing. Just give a personal. It's an empty lane, and I feel it is beautiful. Or if you are undone by it, or I feel it is painful. Could be anything. Always make two sentences. One sentence of the sight that you've confronted. Another one is the feel, what you felt inside after you've confronted that particular sight. Let's go ahead. You see this old man. Now, on our commute from our home to our office, or when we are going for an errand, how often do we come across people uh, who are just walking by? And some of them have, some of them are a little odd, upbeat, eccentric, whatever. So when you come across anything on the street that is a little odd, that is a little eccentric, and definitely all of us do get a thought inside us when we see something a little odd, when we see something different, we definitely get that thought. But as a new entrant who's trying to master the language, it is an onus upon your shoulders to spew that sentence out so that your feeling gets reflected or it gets projected, which will further provide more scope for you to make more and more sentences. The language is about sentences, it's not about words. You're incredibly mistaken if you've heard of that particular advice. I'm sure you must have heard of these advices, which I believe are, I would say, always be against the grain of such advices because they don't go so far. They only go so far, I would say, rather. Language is about sentences, it's not about words. The more sentences you have, the more equipped your language is. Words alone is like an armory with chinks all over. That's it. So this is an old man, or the old man is holding a walking stick. Now, as we just talked about in the previous uh, situation when there was an empty lane, what do you feel about it? If you can't talk more about him, then what do you feel about him? I feel a sense of pity, compassion towards the old, wilting, weakening, gaunt man. So now we got two sentences. Just when we made the attempt to spew out our feeling, we made one sentence and then we shed light on our feeling. Can't we make one more sentence on it? Can't we make one more sentence on it? You can go into self introspection. Why do I feel like that? Why do you feel a sense of pity for this old man? What could be your answer? And if you do not have an answer to that, you can use a simple sentence. And I'm puzzled to no end. I am blank, or I'll just draw a blank, or I'm clueless. So now you made 3-4 sentences. Where at first place you were just about to feel something, and that feeling would have diluted without it ever taking the shape of words. Go ahead. Let's put the red ribbon on today's class. And what conclusion we have arrived at is this technology is not given enough credit. And I believe a certain aspects of this are criminally underrated. Let's make it a point to rejoice in certain luxuries, advantages that this diminutive device provides us with, and try and thrive. Because what this does is perfectly perfect. This could be one remedy for all woes of yours. Think about it. And from this point onwards, use it to your benefits, to your advantages. Whenever you read something in it, you read in English. Whenever you watch something on it, you watch it in English. And whenever you're confronted by anything that is odd, eccentric, or a little different, you will not restrict that feeling to only die as a mere feeling. You will pour it out in words, in forms, in a phrase, in idioms. Your job is to beautify the feeling. And you only beautify it, decorate it, when you give it the form of words, when you make it an art. I'd like to finish the class on the same note the way we started. One language, when you learn one language, it opens the corridor for you. When you learn two languages, it opens the doors for you. First one to that, these are the scanners. If you scan them, you will be presented with all our social media handles, be it Telegram, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Instagram, and therein you can update yourself as to what new things are coming and what are we currently doing, and hopefully you'll become a part of it. You'll definitely love it as to what we are doing. This is our new channel. Please support us, like our videos, share it, subscribe it, and hit the bell button so you'll be updated whenever we make a new video. Thank you.